We will now discuss human subjects in research. We researchers are ultimately responsible for the way the public views research. Prior to 1906, there were essentially no guidelines or laws in effect governing human subjects in research in the United States. No consumer regulations, FDA, Common Rule, or IRB. Three infamous events transpired in the 20th century to greatly affect the way the general public views human subjects in research. They are the Tuskegee syphilis study, the Nuremberg doctors' trials, and the thalidomide tragedy. Wikipedia provides good, in-depth analysis of these events. If you wish to know more, please visit their website or conduct your own research. As a result of these tragic events, the Belmont Report was written. It sets forth three basic ethical principles: respect for persons, including their individual autonomy. This also means protecting individuals with reduced autonomy. Beneficence, which aims to maximize benefits and minimize harm. Justice, or a balancing of researchers' burdens and benefits. Application of the general ethical principles to the conduct of human subjects research leads to the following requirements. Respect for persons requires that informed consent is obtained and privacy about the person and confidentiality of data is maintained. Beneficence causes us to consider the risk versus benefits of a research project, as well as the scientific merit of the project. Justice demands that the subject's selection is equitable. What exactly are we talking about? Here are some definitions. Research is a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. A human subject is a living individual about whom an investigator conducting research obtains data through intervention or interaction with the individual or identifiable private information. Consent is the legally effective agreement of the subject or subject's legally authorized representative based on information that is given to the subject or the representative in language that is understandable. Assent is a child's or cognitively impaired person's affirmative agreement to participate in research. And permission is the agreement of parents or guardian to the participation of their child or ward in research. Certain low-risk research is exempted from federal law, but remember, in no case should investigators make the final determination of exemption from applicable federal regulations or provisions of their institution's assurance. These exemptions do not imply that investigators have no ethical responsibilities to subjects in such research. They mean only that IRB review and approval of the research is not required by federal regulations. The Institutional Review Board, or IRB, is a committee established to protect the rights and welfare of human research subjects recruited to participate in research activities conducted under the auspices of the institution with which it is affiliated. An institutional review board must have at least 5 members. These members must be sufficiently qualified through the experience and expertise of its members, the diversity of their backgrounds, including considerations of their racial and cultural heritage, and their sensitivity to issues such as community attitudes to promote respect for its advice and counsel in safeguarding the rights and welfare of human subjects. An IRB has authority to approve, require modification in, or disapprove all research activities, including proposed changes previously approved human subject research. The IRB conducts continuing review of approved research at intervals appropriate to the degree of risk, but not less than once per year. The IRB has the authority to suspend or terminate previously approved research that is not being conducted in accordance with the IRB's requirements, or that has been associated with the unexpected serious harm to subjects. And finally, institutional officials may not authorize or approve the conduct of human subjects research that has not been approved by the IRB. Research approved by an IRB may be subject to further review and approval or disapproval by officials of the institution. Informed consent refers to the voluntary choice of an individual to participate in research based on an accurate and complete understanding of its purposes, procedures, risks, benefits, alternatives, and any other factors that may affect a person's decision to participate. Informed consent is not a single event or just a form to be signed. Rather, it is an educational process that takes place between the investigator and the prospective subject. The basic concepts of the consent process include full disclosure of the nature of the research and the subject's participation, adequate comprehension on the part of the potential subjects, and the subject's voluntary choice to participate. Informed consent must be prospectively obtained from the subject or legally authorized representative of the subject, if allowed by state law. Information must be conveyed in language understandable to the subject, not the researcher. Subjects must be given sufficient opportunity to consider whether they want to participate. Consent must be given without coercion or undue influence by the researcher. Subjects must not be made to give up legal rights or be given the impression that they are being asked to do so. The federal regulations detail specific elements of information which must be provided to each subject. They must receive a description of the research and subject's participation, including the identification of experimental procedures, a description of reasonably foreseeable risks, a description of expected benefits, and any potentially advantageous alternatives to participation. Participants must receive an explanation of confidentiality protections, an explanation of compensation for injuries policy, be told whom to contact with questions about the research and research subjects' rights, and be given an explanation that participation is voluntary. Even if the IRB has approved a consent procedure, it is the investigator's responsibility to ensure that each potential subject understands the information and to take the appropriate steps necessary to gain that comprehension. Individuals may not be involved as research subjects unless they understand the information that has been provided. Informed consent must be legally effective under applicable state law. Only legally competent adults can give consent. In most cases, minors cannot give consent. Only parents or legal guardians can give permission for minors to participate in research. Incompetent adults cannot give consent. This may include the developmentally disabled, the cognitively impaired elderly, and unconscious or inebriated individuals. Only legally authorized representatives in accordance with state law can give permission for incompetent adults to participate in research. The evaluation of competence must be made on a case-by-case basis. In addition to obtaining permission from parents or legal guardians, provisions must be made for soliciting the assent of the children or incompetent adults. The information provided to subjects should make clear that the activity involves research and describe the overall experience that will be encountered. Researchers must explain the research activity, including any parts that are experimental, for example, a new drug, extra tests, separate research records, or non-standard means of management, such as flipping a coin for random assignment or other design issues. All reasonably foreseeable risks, discomforts, inconvenience, and harms that are associated with the research activity should be described. Investigators should be forthcoming about risks and not underestimate or gloss over reasonably foreseeable risks. If additional risks are identified during the course of the research, the consent process and documentation will require revisions to inform subjects as they are subsequently contacted or newly contacted. Any benefits that subjects may reasonably expect to encounter should be described. Investigators should be frank about benefits and not overestimate or magnify the possibility of benefit to the subject. There may be no benefit other than a sense of helping the public at large. Payment to subject should not be listed or described in the benefits section. Appropriate alternatives to participating in the research project, particularly alternatives that might be advantageous to the subject, should be described. For example, in drug studies, the medications may be available through their family doctor or clinic without the need to volunteer for the research activity. Investigators should be reasonably specific about describing the nature and type of available alternatives. It is not sufficient simply to state that the researcher will discuss alternative treatments with the subject. The regulations require that subjects be told the extent to which their personally identifiable private information will be held in confidence. For example, sponsors, funding agencies, regulatory agencies, and the IRB may review research records. Some studies may need sophisticated encryption techniques to prevent confidentiality breaches or a certificate of confidentiality to protect the investigator from involuntary release, that is, such as under subpoena, of subjects' names or identifiable private information. If research-related injury, that is, physical, psychological, social, financial, or otherwise, is possible in research that is more than minimal risk, an explanation must be given of whatever voluntary compensation and treatment will be provided. Note that the regulations do not limit injury to physical injury. This is a common misinterpretation. The regulations require the identification of contact persons to answer subjects' questions about the research and their rights as research subjects. Subjects must also be informed as to whom to contact in the event of any research-related injuries. These areas must be explicitly stated and addressed in the consent process and documentation. The regulations require statements regarding voluntary participation and the right to withdraw at any time. Subjects must be informed that participation is voluntary, subjects may discontinue participation at any time, and that there is no penalty or loss of benefits for not participating or discontinuing participation. Where appropriate, the following additional elements of informed consent shall be included: currently unforeseeable risks, termination of participation, additional costs to subjects, consequence of withdrawal, informing of new findings, and number of subjects. Informed consent is documented by use of a written consent form approved by the IRB and signed by the subject or subject's legally authorized representative. A copy shall be given to the person signing the form. The written presentation of information in the consent form is used to document the basis for consent and for the subject's future reference. The consent document should be revised when deficiencies are noted or when additional information will improve the consent process. The information that is given to the prospective subject or his or her representative must be in language understandable to the subject or representative. Consent forms should be written at a level appropriate to the understanding of the subjects to be enrolled. Technical language should be avoided. OHRP strongly discourages use of the first person in consent documents. For example, "I have been fully informed about." Such statements unfairly ask subjects to make statements that the subject is not in a position to verify. For example, the subject has no way to verify that the investigator has provided full and complete information. Investigators have the primary responsibility for protecting the rights and welfare of human research subjects and are responsible for complying with all applicable provisions of their institution's assurance. Investigators are expected to be knowledgeable about the requirements of the federal regulations, applicable state law, their institution's assurance, and institutional policies and procedures for the protection of human subjects. Investigators are responsible for protocol and complying with all IRB determinations, ensuring that each potential subject understands the nature of the research and of the subject's participation, and taking whatever steps are necessary to gain that comprehension. Providing a copy of the IRB-approved informed consent document to each subject at the time of consent, unless the IRB has specifically waived this requirement. All signed consent documents are to be retained in a manner approved by the institution. Promptly reporting proposed changes in previously approved human subject research activities to the IRB. The proposed changes may not be initiated without prior IRB review and approval, except where necessary to eliminate apparent immediate hazards to the subjects. Reporting progress of approved research to the IRB as often as and in the manner prescribed by the IRB. Promptly reporting to the IRB any unanticipated problems involving risks to subjects or others. SD BRIN would like to thank Roland Laudenberg, who authorized this script, and Lisa Korkuska, who helped in editing the script.